This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
According to the National Sleep Foundation, 60% of Americans have driven while feeling sleepy, and 37% admit to actually having fallen asleep at the wheel in the past year. Still, experts say many people cannot tell if or when they are about to fall asleep. On today's show, we'll discuss what's called drowsy driving. And joining me now is registered nurse and sleep specialist Lisa Firestein with Active Healthcare. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
As I said at the beginning of the program, about half, actually more than half, about 60% of Americans have reported feeling sleepy while they're driving. How big an issue is drowsy driving in the U.S.?
Well, the National Sleep Foundation 2009 Sleep in America poll showed that 1% of Americans, which is 1.9 million people, have either had near misses or actually had a drowsy driving accident. Wow. That's a pretty shocking number.
Absolutely.
Some other really stunning statistics from the National Highway Safety Administration. They've reported up to 100,000 crashes that are related to drowsy driving, resulting in 1,500 deaths and 71,000 injuries.
Wow. And experts have also described this as an underreported and under-recognized public safety issue that's plaguing America's highways. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it really is an unmet public health need. We're seeing a lot of legislation happening around distracted driving, specifically our texting and our cell phone usage, and that's absolutely an important topic that we need to be addressing, and we need to be addressing legislatively. But drowsy driving is not something that we can handle legislatively because there's not a drowsometer. There's no way to really check to see if somebody is drowsy. So we as Americans have just kept ourselves going with lots of medication, caffeine, and we believe that we can drive drowsy and just do it through sheer will, that we can do this and we can make this happen. But it takes just one moment of unawareness for there to be about a bad outcome, just 1 millisecond.
We all know about the dangers of drinking and driving and know that it's illegal and that it can be deadly. Do you think that people really understand the significance and the dangers of driving while drowsy, and do you think that people take it as seriously?
I do not think that people understand that driving drowsy is similar to driving while impaired. It's very much shown in the literature that we lose our sense of situational awareness. We're not making as good judgments, and our reaction times are slowed when driving drowsy. So it absolutely can be compared. Also, there are studies that show that anybody that is up for between 17 and 20 hours straight, that their sense of impairment is very similar to a blood alcohol level of somebody that is impaired with alcohol. And you can think of our teens. Our teens are at biggest risk, and many of them are getting up before it's sunlight to go to school, and then they come home and they may go to work, and then they're driving home at 11, 12 o'clock, or our college students. And so that sense of impairment occurs in that drowsy driving. And we also have some studies that show that of the teens that are driving, about 5,000 to 7,000 teens are going to have a fatal accident per year. And of that 55%, half of those teen fatal accidents have been attributed to drowsy driving.
So this is definitely a group that is at risk. What are some of the other groups, or who are some of the other groups that are considered at risk for drowsy driving?
Well, obviously our youngest teenagers, And then we have our commercial drivers, because they're on the highway for long distances, and many of them are driving through the night. Our folks that are traveling, doing a lot of traveling and driving for business, so they log lots of miles, and they also might be, if they do a lot of jetting, they're jet lag, they've crossed some time zones. And then our untreated sleep apnea patients. Mm-hmm. Those are some of our big risk categories.
We're certainly going to hear more about that category in a little bit later in the program. But as with any other hazardous issues and concerns, the warning signs are there. There are a number of red flags that tell people that they need to stop and take a rest. And let's talk a little bit about some of those. And the first one is difficulty focusing, frequent blinking, or heavy eyelids. That is a definite red flag.
Absolutely. And there's a number of other red flags, weaving in and out of the lanes, missing your exit, or all of a sudden realizing you don't know where the last 2 miles or the last 10 minutes occurred. Lots of daydreaming. But what's really concerning about these warning signs are that we, as people that drive, we don't realize that those are warning signs. We don't put the puzzle together, and so we just keep on going and driving. And if we can start putting that warning symbols together, then we can stop a potential bad outcome. Because as I said earlier, all it takes is one unaware moment, 1 millisecond of those eyelids dropping, and probably a lot of people listening to us tonight will say, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And it takes 1 millisecond, and it can potentially be fatal.
Right. Now, some other signs, yawning repeatedly or rubbing your eyes, that's another red flag.
Yes, yes.
And trouble keeping your head up, or as you mentioned, drifting from one lane to another, or tailgating, or you hit the shoulder or run off the side of the road, that's another red flag. And people hear these signs and think, okay, this is common sense. When you start to feel that way, you need to just stop. But a lot of people don't. So what is your expert advice on what people should do should they experience some of these warning signs? What do they do to handle that?
Well, obviously the best thing is, if you're in a position to stop for the night, do that. Not everybody is. But I would really caution folks to, before they hit the road, there's some things you can do. And before you're hitting the road for a long trip, especially around holiday times where maybe there's more stress associated, or you want to get a rush on the traffic and leave at 2 or 3 a.m., is think twice before you do that. The number one thing you can do to prevent drowsy driving is get an adequate night's sleep. And for most Americans, adult Americans, it's 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. So that's number one. The second thing you can do before hitting the road and while hitting the road is really take some breaks. So every 2 hours or every 100 miles, stop, take a bathroom break, stretch. And then another thing you can do is arrange for a travel companion. And a travel companion can talk to you, keep you awake, make sure you don't fall asleep, and most importantly, switch out with you if you do start to get some of those symptoms that you're falling asleep. And lastly, avoid any medication that causes drowsiness. And there are a number of medications that can cause drowsiness. Some of our antidepressive medications, some of our high blood pressure medications, some of our asthma medications, and decongestants. And so avoid those medicines, as well as absolutely avoid alcohol.
Okay.